Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
Wavelength.
Mental illness doesn't have to be a life sentence.
Alcohol addiction, abuse, misuse is the same all over the globe.
Sparking the combos about Adelaide.
So it made me feel very confident that if we did have it in the state, we were going to know about it.
You should be having.
There'll be guys that are trained, but they don't feel like they're good enough to take their shirt off.
Almost everyone is a culprit of doom scrolling. Anyone who has a mobile phone.
On Fresh 92.7.
Welcome to Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having. I'm your host, David, and tonight I am once again joined by Hamish. How are you doing?
Yeah, good, mate. Yourself?
I'm doing very well.
Tonight, on Wavelength, we're asking, is there a better way to cure addictions? The 12-step program has long been the go-to way to recover from alcoholism, drugs and other addictions, but it doesn't always work for everyone. So what are the other options out there, and are they as effective?
Wavelength is also going to explain the COVID vaccine rollout, but next we're looking into where AIDS is at in 2021. You're listening to Fresh.
Wavelength.
Hamish, there's this really great show on Stan at the moment. I highly recommend it, called It's a Sin.
Okay.
So basically it gives a really honest look into, I guess, what it was like being a queer person in the 80s, in London as well, during the AIDS crisis. And you know what that was like. But obviously the world has come quite far since then, and AIDS is absolutely not a death sentence like it used to be.
No. So to get the full picture about where the disease is at in 2021, Amelia spoke to Dr. Travis Brown from Clinpath.
Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
In 2019, it was estimated that roughly 29,000 people live with HIV in Australia. As medicine has improved and made long strides, the vast majority of people that are infected receive treatment and are able to live regular lives. Dr. Travis Brown from Clinpath Pathology joins me to explain how HIV is currently treated and the misconceptions people have about the virus.
Pre-1996, this was an illness that people died from. But now it's not, and it's not in people's minds so much. And so people, it tends to be in gay, homosexual community, particularly male, but there's 20% of infections that are heterosexual transmission. And so there is a perception that it's not a problem because we manage it so well. And the problem is there's about 1,000 infections around Australia each year, new infections that these people have to manage. So a common misconception is it's not a problem. And even if you do get it, it's not a problem. Well, it's a life-altering diagnosis and we can manage it really well, but it is something that needs to be managed.
For the people that do get it and they go on antiretroviral treatment, what does that do for them and what does that mean for their lives?
So when we first started getting the antiretrovirals, they were really poorly tolerated. So people had pretty bad side effects and they had to work out, do I manage the side effect or do I manage the disease? Now they're really well tolerated and they're very effective, but it's like taking a tablet each day. So they can live with the illness and live with it well, but it is effectively taking medication each day to manage it.
And can taking that medication bring what is called an undetectable viral load?
Yeah, so that's the ultimate aim. So we will monitor, so once someone has a confirmed HIV diagnosis, they will then monitor the viral load. And that gives us the indication of someone that is getting the management of the disease, and we want it to be undetectable. And the reason why we want it to be undetectable is because effectively those people, if we can get them to that level and keep that level, their risk of transmission is almost nil. And that's the thing. So they've done studies where people who have HIV and non-HIV partners, and if their level is undetectable, it's almost impossible for them to transmit the virus. So that's what you're aiming for. It's not that it's been cured, but it's being managed at such a good level that it's virtually not transmissible.
How are people able to detect that they have HIV? Because a lot of the symptoms might be similar to something else. So how do they know they have it before it turns into something worse like AIDS?
Yeah. So it's a hard area because the acute symptoms of HIV is sort of flu-like symptoms. And so that's, you'll have a contact, and then about 2 to 4 weeks later, what we get, this acute infection, is just flu-like symptoms. So it's headache, it's a bit of fever, fatigue, feeling unwell. And most people dismiss that, rightly so. Pre these times, you would not worry about it much at all. And then it would go into what we call a chronic infection or a latent infection, and just sort of still be proliferating but not showing much signs until 10 years later or so, where they get the AIDS-acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, where they get the really bad immune sort of loss of T cells and infections. So the main thing is, how do we identify it? It's actually through screening. So if someone's had a contact that could be suspect, it's seeing the doctor and actually saying, look, I've had a sexual contact here, or even a risky encounter.
So would you recommend for people to have that conversation with someone new in their life?
Oh, absolutely. This was, it's not just HIV as well. We've got a whole bunch of range. You talk about, sexual encounters, gonorrhea, chlamydia, herpes.
Just get the full package
experience.
Test
do
it
the
all.
clear. Exactly. Get all clear. Look, it's reasonable to have, because again, these are the infections going around. A lot of them are easily managed. Some are lifelong, and HIV is, again, one of those lifelong changing ones. It's an important conversation to have with any prospective partner that you may have. And again, if you happen to fall into the, passion zone and everything, and then feel that was not the best decision, there is some prophylaxis. We can take some medication to help reduce the risk of HIV transmission.
Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having on Fresh 92.7.
That was Amila chatting with Dr. Travis Brown from Clinpath about AIDS in 2021. Thankfully, no longer a death sentence.
Yeah, that's it. I think that's the real big takeaway from the story there is HIV has been one of those things that has had such a stigma attached to it for a really, really long time.
Of course.
And so much misinformation, so many urban legends about what it really is and what it really does. And so it was really interesting to hear how it hasn't been quite cured, but it has been managed so effectively, or it can be managed so effectively these days, to the point of it being something that you can absolutely live with.
Yeah.
And something that does not need to be the end of your, sexual life or your social life.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean the same kind of social isolation that it did back in the day.
It had such a really disgusting stigma attached to it, like you said, especially for homosexual men. It was just a lot of grief going on in the 80s.
It has such a dark history.
And always, if you are worried about something going on with your sexual health, you can go to places like Shine SA in the city.
Yeah, those guys are great.
Especially if you're LGBT.
Yeah.
They'll be very kind to you and look after you. And it's the quickest test these days.
Really accommodating there.
You can pretty much get the results back in like a day. So
yeah.
Anyway, coming up after the break, we'll be cracking into our main story of the evening about alternatives to the 12-step program for overcoming addiction. So stay tuned.
Wavelength.
So, Hamish, you're bringing us this story this evening. Tell me a bit about it and what inspired you to go down this rabbit hole.
Yeah, so we're going to be talking about alternatives to, drug and alcohol rehab, but also just rehab for addiction or addictive behaviours in general. Doing some research, found that there are some people out there providing a different way to do this, and it was really interesting to see how it's done.
Fascinating topic. So, first, you spoke with someone who's gone through both AA and an alternative. We're going to hear that interview now.
Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
I got to a point where I started to look at myself. I was starting to think that there was something wrong with me. On reflection, I started to look at how I was behaving. And when I really started to get honest, I started to see that the way that I behaved around drugs and alcohol and how I used that in my life to cope was the problem, and it wasn't necessarily myself. Today I'm coming up on 12 years of sobriety, and the life that I have today, outshines anything that I could have imagined when I first started out.
Since its inception in the 1930s, the 12-step program has become the most recognised form of drug and alcohol recovery across the world. But what if that approach doesn't work for you? Over the years, there's been a growing demand for alternatives to the 12-step program. And this week, we spoke with a former alcoholic who has been sober for 12 years now and has been through both Alcoholics Anonymous and a new, younger program called Smart Recovery. He gives us his perspective on both approaches and what makes Smart different from the 12 steps.
The 12-step program, there's a clear way of working things, step-by-step process. Obviously, being called 12-step, there's a very large support network out there of people who understand what it's like to go through a variety of different experiences. So there's a wealth of knowledge there when it comes to overcoming challenges and recovery. The other program, Smart Recovery, the beauty of that one is that it has given me a way to forward focus on a week-to-week basis and able to implement changes into my life in a way that is applicable to me. Sometimes one can be a little bit more hard-lined, and this side with Smart Recovery, I'm able to set smaller achievable goals and a name for them. And then with a weekly meeting coming back, I can review the goal that I set the previous week. And if I missed it, there's a discussion around, okay, well, what were the things that caused that to happen? How could we look at it differently next time? And then the added benefit is to having other people from different walks of life, again, with different challenges, also having the opportunity to share their points of view on what your challenge might be. And having that different point of view can often be the kicker that helps you to get over the line.
What did you personally identify as kind of like the main differences between the two approaches? So you touched a little bit there on the fact that Smart focuses more on a short-term basis. So they kind of focus on just a 7-day focus and you set goals for those 7 days and then you come back in a week's time and reevaluate and set new goals. So I guess what is it about Smart that kind of separates it from the 12-step program?
The Smart program is a program that you're able to tailor to yourself. It's a program that can meet you where you're at. Smart Recovery doesn't have labels in there, so there's no alcoholic, there's no narcotics, there's no overeating, there's no sex addiction. It's problematic behaviour. So the problematic behaviour you're dealing with is you deal with it at where you're at. And for some people, they know it's a problem. They'd like to minimise the impact that it has on their lives, and they're able to work through a process to get to a place where they feel comfortable with that problematic behaviour. When you go to a 12-step program, the only choice is abstinence. So it gives you that opportunity to be able to find the level that works for you. And if it happens to be that abstinence is what's needed, then that's what's needed. But the choice is yours.
Speaking personally, you found the approach of total abstinence wasn't exactly the right path for you to take.
Initially, I started in 12-step program, so I didn't have a choice. At the time, Smart Recovery wasn't even in Australia. And it's a very daunting experience to be told you cannot have that again. It's very difficult to wrap your head around. You know, I've been doing it for the best part of 20 years. So have you just turn it off overnight and go and never touch it again when all you can really ever know is behaving that certain way? Whereas with Smart Recovery, you're given the opportunity to attempt different ideas. And I'll give you an example. So, I was in a meeting. One particular guy had a problematic behaviour. It was impacting on his life. He wanted to stamp it out during the week. He was happy to participate in his problematic behaviour over the weekends, but during the week it was affecting his work life. It was affecting the way he ate, and it was affecting him getting up and going to work the next day. So the first goal was to come off of the end of a weekend and just get through Monday and maybe Tuesday, and that was his goal. And it took him probably about a month to get it. He might get a Monday and then he'll miss it, and he'll get it and he'll miss it. But eventually over time he started to stretch it out. And each time he failed, the group were able to sit together, listen to what had happened, and we were able to nut out ideas and look at different things that were coming up that were causing these relapses. And eventually over time he got to the place where he was happy, and he would participate in his problematic behaviour after work from Friday and through to Sunday, and then from Monday to Thursday it was game on, and he was back. He was focused on what he needed to do, and that was to get up to go to work and be on top of his meals. And that's where he got to, and he was happy with the way that was. And that's what smart recovery can give to people.
Yeah. So am I right in saying that smart recovery facilitates a bit more of a collaborative approach than the 12-step program?
Yeah, that's correct. In the 12-step program, it's about talking in a way that's reflecting on your own self, and that's it. And then it's up to other people to sort of take bits and pieces away. When you come to a smart recovery meeting, you get to talk about what it is that you're either having trouble with or wanting to achieve, and putting it on the table. And you're allowed, it's like playing poker in reverse. You show your cards and then you walk away with a winning hand. The way you got that winning hand was by other people handing their cards over.
What would you say to anyone else out there who might be listening at the moment who is struggling with addiction, or who maybe hasn't found the success that they're looking for through the 12-step program?
Just look for the willingness to change. Doesn't mean you have to do it, or it's a requirement for you to do it. Just be willing to at least have a go. The second thing is it's about being honest, not just with friends, family, work colleagues. It's about being honest with yourself, because you're the person that you go to bed with. You're the person that you wake up with. The sooner you can get honest about who you are and how you behave, you're already on your way. The next thing I would recommend is to start looking out for all those programs that are out there. Smart Recovery is a great place to start for those who want an alternative to a 12-step program. And then along the way, there's a lot of learning to be done about looking at the way you think, to looking at the way you behave, and how you can do things differently, which you might not find in a 12-step program. If it turns out that either one of those two aren't for you, don't give up. Keep looking. If you keep looking and you don't give up, you'll get there. One comment that I would really love to make, and I hope it makes a big difference to a lot of people who are on the bottom at the moment and they're not sure how to get up. Often in recovery circles, it's called a rock bottom. And I just want to let those people out there that are at their rock bottom, when you hit rock bottom, that's a good solid foundation to come back up. And it's possible. There's plenty of people out there that have proven it, and they're no different to you or I. And you can do it. I know you can do it, because if I can do it, anybody can do it, trust me. But yeah, the rock bottom is the solid foundation for you to build a life of recovery.
Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having on Fresh 92.7.
That there was you, Hamish, speaking with someone who has done both the traditional 12-step program and an alternative program called Smart Recovery to quit alcohol, yeah?
Yeah, that's correct.
Very fascinating chat there. 20 years, though. That's amazing.
Yeah. So you're talking about a really deeply enforced pattern of behaviour there, which is very, very difficult to overturn and turn around.
Yeah, I mean, we're not trying to bash the 12-step program.
Not at all.
That's something that has clearly helped thousands and thousands and thousands of people.
Absolutely.
But sometimes it doesn't work for some people as well.
That's right.
So if there's other options and if people know about them, I think that's important to really get that out there. Well,
100%.
Thank you so much. Anyway, later in the show, we are going to be speaking with a program manager from Smart Recovery. But next, Hamish will let you know what the hell has been going on this week.
What the hell is going on this week? Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
Welcome back to the segment that will keep you informed now that Facebook won't. Yes, the social media giant put on their big boy pants this week and made the big call to ban all news being shared in Australia, meaning a worryingly large section of the public are now going without their daily updates on Bindi Owen's baby, the latest threat of Ethiopian gangs, and which AFL player's wife took their dog for a walk. But apparently, the advertiser was lucky enough to escape the ban, as Facebook doesn't consider them a source of real news. Meanwhile, the other big story that's been conveniently overshadowed this week was the bombshell allegation that a Liberal staffer was raped within the walls of Parliament House. It seems that the $200,000 Prime Minister Scott Morrison spent on an empathy consultant hasn't paid off after he had to ask his wife Jenny whether this was a bad thing or not. A man had to be evacuated from hotel quarantine in Victoria, where he was escorted outside with a rubbish bag over his head. Wow, those budget cuts are really starting to show. The good news, though, is that Victorians are now out of lockdown and a third wave seems to have been avoided, meaning Dan Andrews' hairline is safe for now. Sia's debut film, Music, was released to near universal criticism for portraying its autistic main character as stereotypical and offensive. Hey, here's a crazy idea. Maybe from now on, we should just get autistic people to play autistic people. And in sport, crowds at the Australian Open were told off for booing men's player Daniil Medvedev when he faced off against fan favourite Stefanos Tsitsipas, but this didn't seem to impact his game at all, who won the match in straight sets.
Your boos mean nothing. I've seen what makes you cheer.
He went on to duke it out with Novak Djokovic in the final, who eventually won the Grand Slam event in a typically boring and expected outcome. And that's what the hell's been going on this week.
Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having on Fresh 92.7.
Thank you for that, Hamish, and thank you for always keeping us informed.
No worries. My job just became so much more important this week. I love the idea that, like, because news isn't on Facebook, news just doesn't exist now, apparently. Like, people don't, it's almost like people don't realise, like, there are news sites.
They've always been there.
And they'll still be there.
They were there before. They're not going anywhere. What? Why? I can't believe the advertiser wasn't classified as news.
No, it was. The advertiser is banned. I was just making a joke.
I thought you were being serious.
I wish that was the case, David. I really do.
There's something in that, the fact that I actually thought that you were being serious, like that's the reputation of that newspaper.
I know. That's satire at its best.
Oh, wow. I thought that was real. I thought you were being serious.
I love it. I love the fact that you just didn't even even blink at that.
No, I was just like, oh, that's so funny.
Yeah, that's so true.
That's so funny that really happened.
Of course.
Wavelength.
Before the break, we heard from a guy who wished to remain anonymous about his experiences with the traditional 12-step program and an alternative called the SMART program.
So we wanted to find out a bit more about SMART, so I spoke with Dan Raffell, a program manager from the recovery program.
Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
There are a couple of reasons why some people might not find the 12-step program appropriate for them, with its hardline approach to total abstinence and its definition of addiction as a life sentence. But what other choices are out there for those seeking to get clean? One such alternative is called SMART Recovery, an approach based on cognitive behavioural therapy that operates without any hard and fast rules, letting people choose what works best for them on their road to recovery. I was lucky enough to have a chat with Dan Raffell, the program manager for the Australian branch of the organisation, about what it is they do.
My name's Dan. I'm from Smart Recovery Australia. I'm one of the national program managers and trainers at Smart Recovery. Smart Recovery is a worldwide group support program, a mutual aid group support program. Smart Recovery, in essence, is a self-management and recovery program. That's what SMART stands for, self-management and recovery training. It's weekly meetings that run across Australia. They can be run by organisations or by Smart Recovery or also by volunteers. And this is about really creating a space for participants to come and try and, I guess, challenge themselves, maybe look at aspects of the problematic behaviour that they want to change and adapt and try and move forward with some helpful practical strategies and solutions that come from the support of the group. Really, at the essence, it's a behavioural change program.
What kind of evidence does support your approach?
Primarily, a lot of the work that we do draws upon the principles and philosophy of cognitive behavioural therapy. So it's really looking and understanding the process of people's thoughts, feelings and behaviours and how they're pretty normal for most people, and sometimes we can engage in certain behaviours or certain cycles that can be unhelpful, and they can be created this cycle, this unhelpful maladaptive process or reflexes to want to go back to these types of behaviours to try and find some meaning or some solution to things that we're dealing with, whether it's stress, bereavement or whatever it is, these normal things that happen in life. And unfortunately, some people do choose certain behaviours that have bigger consequences to themselves, physically, mentally and in the community. So it's really draws upon that. It's really about being self-directed, and that's what the facilitators do at Smart Recovery, is help ease that process for them to direct, I guess, their own recovery. We also have a research advisory committee of very high calibre professors and doctors in this field, and they really invest so much time in supporting the evidence-based research around smart recovery.
What is it about your approach that differentiates you from the 12-step program?
I don't mind personally sharing, but I've come through a recovery journey 18 years ago from heroin addiction, and part of my journey was doing 12 steps, but also doing cognitive behavioural therapy as well. Smart recovery works on a 4-point program, which really looks at building and maintaining motivation, looking at cravings and urges, and also problem solving, very practical, solution focused. In the next 7 days, what are you going to do, work on? Rather than this long-term goal of abstinence. People choose what they want for themselves. Now, the differentiation is you may have like Alcoholics Anonymous or something. It might just be people, obviously, alcohol users, or Narcotics Anonymous, Gamblers Anonymous, those types of things. We have everyone attending these meetings predominantly with all types of behaviours, because I think we've all got something really valuable to learn from each other. When it comes to the practical solution of it, we work from a harm minimisation framework, which is not saying that we condone people continuing doing what they do, but it's really their choice. Now, if they are engaging in a behaviour that's unhelpful for them and they want to make change around it, but they don't want to stop, then that's their choice. So we create that space where, yes, you may have some people that are planning to maintain control over their alcohol, or they may choose abstinence. It's completely up to them. But I still think, regardless of what you choose, there's still valuable lessons and experiences you can share with other people that are at a different stage or a different plan from you. When I first came into recovery, there was this mindset of having to say I'm an alcoholic or I'm an addict, and that I'll be this person for the rest of my life. And that's what we really try and change at Smart Recovery, that doesn't need to define me as a person. But I do find it's much more than just the substance that's the issue. It's a lot of the underlying core beliefs of people's lives or the experiences that they've gone through. We tend to engage in behaviours for a reason, and they're not always bad. I guess that's a bit of the difference. We don't really work from what would be traditionally a disease model type of thinking that has transpired over the last few decades, and that a lot of this disease model think that it's an illness and that you'll have this illness for the rest of your life. I personally, in Smart Recovery, don't believe that that's the case all the time. I'm testimony to working these types of programs and 12-step stuff, that you can find freedom from it, and that I am no more or less susceptible to falling into those same patterns as you.
What are some of the biggest misconceptions that we kind of do have about addiction and recovery? How can we kind of approach this subject as a society in a better way?
Look, I think a big part of it is the stigma that's attached to it, especially, with mental health as well. And a lot of people, diagnose addiction as part of that. But in general, when we use labels and try and make sense of what we're experiencing, that can be helpful, but sometimes it can stigmatise people quite significantly, as was mentioned. So I think at Smart Recovery, people come in and realise, actually, the people that are in there are just normal people, and they're not always your atypical your stereotypical person on the street, that type of thing. And I think that can be scary for some people in the community. You see a person on the street down on the luck, and you start making assumptions and stigmatising them that they're dangerous, or they're this or that, or they're going to steal from you, or when you actually unpeel those layers, they're no different than you and I, and they've got themselves in certain situations that they're struggling to get out of. And so stigma is a big part of it, and that's why it's smart we try and reduce that by saying it's not that you're an addict. We don't use those terms. You don't have to name yourself that if you don't want to. If you want to, that's fine, if it's helpful for you, but it is a behaviour. You are defined much more than that as a person. A lot of people are just looking for connection. They have broken relationship, and people really just want that back. You might find a social network that you connect with down the pub. You might find like-minded people that get you or understand you, and you find meaning in that. And unfortunately, then you find identity in that, and that's what can grip people, because then they see themselves as only that, and that's the rest of their life. And so we're trying to break that mold a little bit and say you are much more than that. People that come to my meeting, you may have someone who's homeless or heavily into methamphetamine or something. And then across the table, you have a director of a company who's really successful sitting, sharing advice and sharing a space, supporting each other because of the environment that's created through this reducing stigma.
What can people expect at a SMART meeting?
Well, at the moment, they could be face-to-face or online. These meetings run for 90 minutes. They're guided by trained facilitators. There's a set structure within it that just checks in with them, sets an agenda for discussion. There's a bit of work time, and then there's a bit of confirming the plan for the 7 days for themselves. There's worksheets and tools and different things that are used that are obviously borrowed from the cognitive behavioural principles. There's no set time for the programme because how long is a piece of string? I can't say that one person's recovery is 2 months to 2 years.
Yeah.
It's however long it's helpful for you to find values in the life that you want for yourself. So people can come for 2 weeks, people can come for 2 years. It's really up to you. But I hope eventually, if they're really working the programme, that they will never need us again because they will use these principles in their own life because it is looking at human behaviour and that transcends a substance.
So if someone is struggling with addiction or they just haven't had success with the other programs available out there or they just want to learn more about what you guys are about, where can they go and how can they get in contact with your team?
The website, smartrecoveryaustralia.org.au, and you can see on there what is Smart Recovery, where the meetings are. There's also a section for training, so anyone can train as a facilitator. There's a course that we can do. There's also resources, there's webinars, and we've just launched also an app called Smart Track, which we just launched officially today that helps people map their plans and the recovery journey. We've also got a few different programs for family members as well, because I know a lot of your listeners might have a loved one who's going through this and you're struggling to manage, to support them. Our Family and Friends program is effectively a program for you to put your own oxygen mask on before helping someone else. You're not going to be any use to your family member if you're not coping yourself. So it's about helping families through that as well. I'm always happy to field questions or contact us anytime and more than happy to help.
Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having on Fresh 92.7.
That there was Hamish speaking to Dan Raffell from Smart Recovery, and really just so inspiring. His own story of recovery as well was really cool to hear. And someone who, I guess, has done alternative things as well and now is a program manager for the program as well. So, yeah, great chat there. And I think just really makes it clear that there is other alternatives to the 12-step program.
Yeah,
it's not 100%. The only one.
Yeah, absolutely. That's my biggest takeaway as well, is that there isn't this one-size-fits-all approach.
No.
And we probably need to start realising that. I think a lot of people don't know that or haven't considered that.
Yeah, so if people want to find out more about Smart Recovery, where can they find out?
Yep, so they can just head on over to the website, which is smartrecoveryaustralia.com.au. They've got a number of really great resources over there.
Well, thank you so much for that story, Hamish. It was very interesting and very important as well. Anyway, next, Wavelength explains the highly anticipated rollout of the COVID vaccine.
Wavelength.
So, David, can you believe it? That damn vaccine for COVID is being rolled out right now.
I genuinely can't. Like, it's almost been a year, basically, because it all hit in fringe time, and now it's fringe time, and now we got a vaccine already. But the rollout isn't really the simplest thing to explain, and there's a couple of vaccines in play here. So this week, Wavelength explains the COVID vaccine rollout.
Wavelength explains on Fresh 92.7.
Returning this week is Wavo Explains, where we take a hard look at an important bit of news that's hit the wires. Last year, we kept you up to date on everything that was happening with COVID-19, and while that was really important, we wanted to take a step away from that this year. We broke that promise immediately, and this week we're going to continue in that fine tradition and have a chat about the vaccine rollout, which kicked off today. So let's answer the most important question. Should I get the vaccine? Yes, you should. There are some circumstances that may mean you should hold off on getting the vaccine or that you can't. But for the most of us, yes, the vaccine is safe and you should almost definitely get it. The next question is when? Well, there are 5 stages to the rollout that you need to be aware of. And the first 3 stages will include the people who are at an increased risk of exposure, infection and transmission of COVID-19. They include healthcare workers, aged care workers, disability care workers, and people who live in aged and disability care. people who are also at risk of developing a serious illness, such as old people, people who have a pre-existing condition, and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders. There's also going to be a rollout for the people who are working in critical services, such as the Defence Force and the emergency forces, like ambulances and firefighters. This group of people will probably be getting the Pfizer jab, which has been shown to be 95% effective. After that, the rest of Australia's population aged over 16 will most likely receive the AstraZeneca vaccine. All the vaccines will be given over 2 doses, 3 weeks apart for the Pfizer jab and 12 weeks for the AstraZeneca vaccine. The next question to answer, of course, is where can you get the jab? The Royal Adelaide Hospital and the Flinders Medical Centre will be the first to open a vaccine hub during the first stage, with additional clinics to be added on later based around these hubs. It's still unsure where these hubs are going to be. However, there will be a number of regional and semi-regional vaccination hubs. It's also important to note that the vaccine will not provide you with complete immunity. There is still a chance that in later years you may need an updated COVID vaccine, and health authorities are warning that this does not mean an end to the dangers posed by the threat of COVID-19.
Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having on Fresh 92.7.
That there was Aj explaining the rollout of the COVID vaccine. I probably don't think I'll be getting it very early at all. I'll probably be like the last person to get it, but just because
sounds like we're pretty far down on the list, eh?
It's because we're pictures of perfect health.
Yeah, that's it.
We're young and beautiful.
Yeah, our bodies are a temple. All of that. Yeah. What I found really interesting about the rollout though is that a lot of people have been saying like, oh, I just don't know about this vaccine, man. You know, it's like they've really like rushed it, haven't they? They've really like pushed out really quickly. And it's like, yeah, that's right. Correct. Because we have a pandemic going on. There's a slight sense of urgency involved here.
What did they expect? Oh, like, let's just do lockdowns for 3 more years until we can be like 100% certain.
Yeah.
And they've already said that it's already, like, they've had thousands of people look at the data. It is safe.
Wavelength.
Right now, we've got our favourite weekly segment called Heaps Good News. This week, Davo has got the goods for us.
Heaps Good News on Wavelength.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Heaps Good News. First up, the South Australian Government announced that they will be providing free women's sanitary products to students in every South Australian public school. They had a trial last year at 15 schools. It unsurprisingly went well, and so they're rolling it out statewide. The Education Minister, John Gardner, said, "We want to ensure that no girl or young woman in South Australia is missing school because they don't have access to sanitary products." Awesome. And the New Zealand government announced they're doing it as well. Now, I know we're all sick of COVID news, but this is a huge step toward ending the whole thing in Australia anyway, because the first 142,000 doses of the COVID vaccine have arrived in Australia. These began being administered today, with the first batch going to frontline quarantine, health workers and aged disability care staff and residents. Hopefully we can have some gigs soon as we know them, and who knows, maybe even dancing in venues? Maybe? Anyway, the government says all adults who want the jab should be able to get it by the end of October. Texas is being hit by a pretty bad winter storm, bringing historic colds to the city, which is terrible. But some volunteers are doing some amazing work by saving cold-stunned sea turtles. And so far, they've rescued 2,500, being moved to a conservation facility and even a convention centre. And back to some local good news. The Adelaide Fringe kicked off on the weekend, and it's amazing that we still get to have a Fringe season, despite borders closing and opening all the time, in some cases here and there. But of course, it's at a reduced capacity and as COVID safe as possible, which is fair enough. So I would strongly encourage everyone to go out there and enjoy some shows, support artists who have no doubt been struggling since the last Fringe, and go have a great time. The atmosphere at the Garden of Unearthly Delights and Gluttony really is magical, and the shows are spectacular.
Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having on Fresh 92.7.
Anyway, that brings us to the end of the show tonight. Thanks for listening.
Make sure you're subscribed to the Wavelength podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else you get your podcasts, where you can also find extended versions of our interviews tonight on Smart Recovery. You can listen back to our old episodes right now, and you'll be the first to know when tonight's episode goes up.
That's right. Thank you again for joining me, Hamish. It was always a pleasure to
You're going
have
to
you
have to start paying me, though.
Oh, well, let's see them pay me first. We'll see you guys next week.
Wavelength.
Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.